What is the difference between people who tried AI and people who actually changed how they work using AI?
These technologies are with us, they're going to stay with us for a while.
What's your big guess on how we will work with AI in the next couple of years?
We just get too excited about it, and we're excited about the possibilities and what this new technology can do for us.
So the human-centric led with AI is the future.
Absolutely, because the technology is changing at such a rapid pace. I really enjoy all these conversations and I feel really lucky to be part of these conversations.
This should be a great talk. You know the people side of AI and also the technical side of AI. This should be a great talk.
Hi Sam, great to be here. Yeah, looking forward to the talk.
So from my observation, like working with AI for such a long time, I was always thinking of this question. Why do so many AI tests look really great when you actually build a prototype, but after a while it gets stopped being used? And why do you think that's happening with companies, and what do you see here?
I think there's a couple of different points to consider as we break that question down into smaller components. There's a dimension there of historical learnings. We as an industry for a good 40 years now, or even a little bit more, operate in these cycles where we get excited about the technology and that's the only thing we can talk about at the beginning of that cycle. And some people refer to it as the hype part of the cycle, that initial one. And we just get too excited about it, and we're excited about the possibilities and what this new technology can do for us. And we spend a fair amount of time sharing that excitement with our customers, with the rest of the industry. And for a while, we find ourselves in a situation where we forget that there's no self-purposeness in any of this. It always has to serve an outcome. It always has to be anchored in some intrinsic, well-described, well-measurable motivation to achieve a business outcome or to achieve some value. I think we're in a moment in time where maybe to a degree we're at that same part of the cycle where maybe we were about 15 to 20 years ago with cloud, where initially a lot of people got excited about cloud and almost a running premise was as long as you market yourself to the cloud, you will be fine. I think there's an element to that now with AI as well, where the excitement is translating into that initial potentially hype at the beginning of the cycle, where sometimes we can quite easily get caught in that train of thought of if I only had AI, this problem would be solved and it would be so much easier. But we've all seen those headline grabbing numbers that 70 or 80% of AI related proof of concept pilots, projects don't achieve intended outcomes. And I think there's a lot, obviously, there's never a silver bullet and there's no one single reason, but quite often forgetting about the human dimension, forgetting about the business dimension and the value that needs to be derived does contribute. And in IT, we always talk about the people, process, technology triangle. And we just have to keep in mind that as we move forward, it's always those three aspects that move forward together, because when one side of that triangle becomes dominant, the outcomes are not always there. So I think there's a few different things to consider, and this is something probably we can talk about for a full day, just this first question and this first topic. But at Rapid Circle, what we have done ourselves, we have obviously collected the industry knowledge, the best practices that we were aware of, all of our general knowledge and experience over the last several decades of IT, industry frameworks and general guidance around adoption and change management, like ProSci and so forth. We've collected what the industry considers best practice. We've collected our own experience and our own knowledge in Rapid Circle, because at the end of the day, as you know, Sam, we are customer zero for a lot of our theories and hypotheses and ideas. So we learn from our own example first, and obviously working with our customers, collecting that experience as well and adding that to the mix. We've created an approach that we call Rapid AI, which it's a framework, but it's not, I don't want it to be seen as something rigid. It's more an attempt to collect those best practices, those learnings, and to basically talk to our customers about the point that they are at in their AI journey, whether that is at the beginning of their AI journey, or they're looking to scale, or they're looking to improve their security posture, or they're looking to improve general maturity from a technological capability perspective, or they're looking to improve their adoption cycle. So wherever the customer might be, the general idea is that we will have a set of best practices, experience and skills and knowledge that we can then bring to the table. And to just touch on that original question again that you presented, I think the magic happens when we as people that get excited about technology and that understand the products and platforms, but also when we bring that with our experience to the table, and when we combine that with the customer business expertise and the perspective that the customer organization obviously brings to the table. I think the combination of those two then results in something magical, because we, as much as we love the technology and we really understand the platforms and the products together, only when we combine that with that internal SME business perspective that our customers bring to the table, we move forward in a very constructive way.
That's pretty good. That's a very good take. So you spoke about rapid AI framework, and can you actually touch base and extend on that? So what does it look like when you're talking to an industry leader or a stakeholder? Like, what is that they're actually looking for? And are the leaders on board when you actually present the rapid AI framework? And where are they skeptical about, and what do they agree when you first talk to them about this?
Yeah. So the way we approach our relationship with other industry leaders is obviously initially in a very technology agnostic way, because again, where is the organization going? Where are they at the moment? What is the general strategy for the business to move forward? What does their business want to be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? Because again, there's no self-purposeness in technology, so we really want to understand the general motivation for any organization to why they would potentially be considering a particular pathway for themselves. We love to anchor everything we do within that general business context. We love to understand where is the motivation currently, that intrinsic motivation for the organization and for the leaders stemming from, in order to explore a certain pathway. And the answer doesn't always have to be that the organization perfectly knows where they want to go and what the details of that journey are. So the organization might just, or the leaders might just effectively say that they are just looking to experiment, they're looking to learn. They understand that AI as a technology is something that is becoming prevalent in both our professional and private lives these days, and they just want to build a position on that. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes it's as simple as we're just not sure how this applies to us. How do we start thinking in this space? How do we build a position and a view and an approach? Some of these business leaders are already well along that journey, and they've defined their strategy and they have defined the key principles in which they want to operate, but they're struggling to convert that into an actionable operating model and a series of first steps that they can start undertaking. So again, the general idea of rapid AI as a framework is that sections of that framework and components of that framework are there to deployed in each of these situations so that we can start working with our customers at that right moment of their journey and to support them further. But again, it's not set in stone. We pride ourselves with our continuous learning and continuous improvement processes. So every time we work with a customer, every time we run a project, we learn ourselves about maybe some of our theories did not work. Some of our theories actually need a little bit of improvement or a little bit of tweaking. So we always go back and we always make sure that the learnings are embedded into the framework so that it's a continuously evolving construct that then helps us to evolve and improve as we try and assist and help our customers. We have seen some challenges also when we work with our customers where we talk to leaders who are potentially, due to different reasons, very excited about the technology and would like to see the technology achieve something great for them within a very short time frame, let's say within a space of 2 to 4 weeks. They would really love to find a partner that can work with them to get those quick wins and to build something that's incredibly valuable and complex and will start transforming their business. That's the difficult part of the conversation, then slowly breaking that statement again into smaller components and talking back a little bit in a constructive manner, trying to assess and discover again what are the motivations behind that particular approach, what are the things that are driving these particular leaders, and understanding again that general context in which we need to anchor the conversation, because the way to move forward has to be done in a structured way. We don't want to necessarily participate in that hype cycle, if I may use that word, in a way that we contribute to the statistic of 70 to 80% of proof of concepts and pilots don't reach their intended goal. So we've had a lot of different kinds of conversations. I really enjoy all these conversations, and I feel really lucky to be part of these conversations with all kinds of different industry leaders from all different industries in Australia at this point in time, early in the cycle where we're all collectively learning about how can this technology transform our economy and our businesses.
Yeah, that's a lovely one. I just want to move to the next question, which is about agentic engineering. And I was just reading the Microsoft 2026 Work Trend Index. So it actually shows that the Microsoft 365 has grown something like 15x in a year, at least for some more in larger organizations. So agents, some agentic engineering in that space, it's growing real fast. But given that pace, my question is, agents are already a big thing. When should a team build one, and when is it too much?
So I'm going to respond in a little bit of a philosophical manner to that question, because a lot of the conversations in the AI space do lean from time to time into a bit of a philosophical kind of category. So when it comes to agents, agents don't necessarily have to be considered outside of the general context of the organization and the general context of the technology. So we've seen organizations having to undertake a bit of a maturity journey before we can necessarily get to a point where we start talking about AI agents or agentic engineering. And a lot of organizations will start in the space of personal productivity. So they will start looking at AI in that space. How can AI help an individual inside the organization remove some of that friction out of their daily activities, improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of the processes that these individuals participate in as they interact on a daily basis? It's a bit of a journey to start thinking about the next level where we have come to a point of maturity and understanding of the technology and having the ability to govern and use the technology in a secure, safe, effective way, that we can now start considering, can we hand over small portions of tasks to agents? And is it going to be a combination of many humans and a minor number of agents? Is it going to be a combination of a human controlling a family of agents? Are agents potentially going to work in an autonomous fashion? At the end of the day, this is software, and we're talking about software engineering practices. We're talking about general maturity of an organization to build solutions, to manage those solutions, to operate those solutions, and to measure the return on investment and the effectiveness of these solutions. So technologies are changing, and it's really exciting how quickly we can potentially do some things today, and how we can even outsource portions of the to AI agents. But again, the foundation, the basis of everything is why and how is this going to work and how are we going to measure. And I keep using the word effectiveness and efficiency because the industry sometimes uses the word productivity. And this is, again, quite a philosophical part of the conversation. I think productivity is something very complex to describe and even more complex to measure and show improvements in productivity. Because if we think about how can we potentially describe productivity, we know that it's not just about how quickly we can do something that contributes to our productivity. It's about the quality of our work. So it's not just necessarily about the speed, it's about the quality, it's about the interconnectedness of our work and the general value that it brings over a unit of time. So there's a lot of complexities in this space that organizations need to consider and not necessarily get too excited about the technology without understanding the why and understanding the how, and how do we measure the actual impact and the value that's going to come out of this. And I think there are examples around our Australian economy and just general industries around Australia where organizations have well understood that AI is a force multiplier, but have decided to potentially deploy that force multiplier in a way that it doesn't extend the skills and the capabilities of the organization already. It doesn't extend on what is the core value, the core proposition of the organization, and improves that. Sometimes organizations decide to replace human capability with agentic capability, and we've seen examples where that doesn't yield the results that the organization was aiming to achieve. So there's some examples that we can learn from, both positive and negative, and I think organizations have to fundamentally not necessarily just only look at how can AI potentially be embedded into a workflow or a process in order to speed up a particular part of that workflow process, speed up a task. But are we really utilizing our resources and talent in the best possible way? Is this process or this workflow the optimum way to achieve this outcome? Or are we doing this because we've always done it that way, and now we're trying to inject an AI capability somewhere along the line? A lot of times we explore ideas and AI use cases that are actually something that we should go back and think about the process itself, not just necessarily overlay an existing capability and infuse it with AI abilities, but just potentially even go back and have a look at the process itself and the flow itself and really optimize it first. Potentially apply even some automation to the process before we detect some of the capabilities where AI can help. But I think it always starts with what is the problem we're trying to solve and why we're trying to solve that problem, which is a business problem, not necessarily here's a piece of technology that's really cool and can do some powerful things, and then we go looking for problems to solve with that technology. So over the last few decades, there's been a lot of frameworks and best practices that have been described across the IT industry around this principle of starting with the business problem, really understanding the functional and non-functional requirements that have to be met in order to provide value to solve a business problem, and then potentially looking at what is the best technology that can assist and help in accordance to those requirements. And if you allow me just to be a little bit more philosophical for a moment, I think it's quite crucial to potentially call it out. Part of my own self-discovery throughout my career was understanding what do consumers of services perceive as quality, as a good outcome. We have an ITIL definition of what is a service, and in a general sense, obviously, I think it always falls down to how do consumers or the recipients of value from any technology, how do they see and feel and perceive and experience those non-functional requirements? So an example of that, to make it a little bit less philosophical, is, if let's say if we're flying from Sydney to Singapore. So as consumers of that service, if we think about what is important to us, what's important to us is that the flight happens on time, that it's comfortable, that there's no disruptions to the flight.
Also safe.
That it's safe, absolutely. So in a general sense, these are all non-functional requirements that we're talking about, because we don't get excited about the fact that the plane that we're flying on just had an engine upgrade and the new engine has 5% more horsepower and 3% better fuel efficiency. Right? So it's, we don't get excited about things that we consider commodity. We get excited about our perception of how we receive the service or a product or the value, how it makes us feel. And as philosophical as that sounds, I think, if we translate that to the space that we're in now, again, we're kind of going back to why would we even do something? What is the outcome? What is the value that we are generating? And how will the people perceive and consume that value? And how will that value make them feel? Which takes me back to, as we said, people, process, technology triangle. I'm an adoption and change management specialist, so I focus on people in that triangle. So I'm a little bit biased, but I would like to argue that in the people, process, technology triangle, people are the generators of value for any organization, because people will obviously follow a process or a workflow that will align to the steps or the value chain that needs to be executed. They will use technology along the way and different tools at different points. But the value comes from people, from humans interacting, from humans being part of that value generating chain. Whatever way we boil down each interaction, it's always a human working with another human, talking to another human, doing something with another human, providing a service to another human. So I would like to say that humans are the core of value generation in the triangle, and that human perception of value and quality stems from the non-functional requirements and how they get implemented in IT solutions and technology. So if we take that back to agents, answering some of those critical questions around the business value and how do we measure that business value, and ultimately how are we moving the dial with each of these agents, has to be anchored, I think, in a human-centric design.
Of people. So if people need to trust AI to use it, how do you build that trust?
It's really interesting, and this is almost a daily conversation that we have. I think a good method for that is to demystify the technology. Obviously, I'm just joking, but we do encounter sometimes some of our colleagues, and we have conversations where people have misconceptions about AI, think that AI tools are all-seeing, all-knowing, sentient beings that will know what you had for breakfast and if you've cheated on your partner. What we do and the way we start building trust in these tools is by breaking them down and demystifying them and making them relatable. If I can go, for example, to a very specific tool, Microsoft 365 Copilot, and let's say a theoretical situation of rolling out Microsoft 365 Copilot to the entire organization. The first challenge there is, from an adoption perspective, is the fact that with AI, we're in a really unique situation, maybe even for the first time assessing and working with workplace technologies where people come to work with already developed feelings, thoughts, preconceived ideas about this particular tool. Because AI impacts us so profoundly, both in our private and professional lives. And that duality of that impact is something unique. We haven't necessarily seen that before, because if you think about adoption within a workplace, we would be focusing on technologies and products and services that are standard corporate tools. And adoption was all about understanding how these tools and platforms fit within the work environment and the flows and the processes that we execute and follow every day. But we rarely felt very passionate about Exchange Server. We encountered this on a daily basis where we can watch news on TV, we can consume online content, written videos, articles, opinions about the technology, where it's going, how it's impacting economies and organizations. And there's a lot of different pathways, obviously, we can move looking into the future with this technology. So we all consume that information, and then we come to a work setting and we bring a lot of those thoughts and feelings with us into a work setting. And then let's say within the work setting, we are looking at a tool like Microsoft 365 Copilot. So from an adoption perspective, it makes it even more challenging and complex to start that journey with the organization, with the individuals and the colleagues inside that organization. And we always start by demystifying. We always are very transparent, and as I said initially, there needs to be a dose of humbleness in that moment, because as much as we understand the product and the platform, our colleagues that are there, the people inside the customer organization, they are the business SMEs for that organization. There's a dose of humbleness and learning as well about their perspectives, their thoughts, their feelings about the journey that they're on. Adoption and change management is an incredible discipline to work in, because one of the general principles of the discipline is that organizations don't change, and organizational change is the sum of individual changes of all people inside the organization. So for us, what that means is that we need to consider all these thoughts and feelings and opinions and different points at which each of our colleagues' journey is currently at. So kind of going again to that initial moment in which we try to demystify the technology, we try to make it much more transparent in a sense of understanding how it works, how to drive it to get most out of it. We very clearly call out the limitations, which things can be achieved with this technology, which things can't, where this particular technology or any of the specific products or capabilities reaches its limit and stops being effective. So I think in order to build the initial trust, those are some of the techniques we need to deploy. We reserve a dose of humbleness, and I have to learn about the business and the people and understand perspectives and feelings. We have to understand that this specific point in time and us looking at this technology will mean different things to different stakeholders. And we just need to manage those individual journeys and aspects the best we can. The challenging bit is effectively uncovering some IT concepts to colleagues who specialize in other fields. We have colleagues that specialize in finance and colleagues that specialize in sales and customer relationships and in compliance or whatever it might be. and who haven't necessarily been exposed to IT concepts or terminology. So there's a little bit of a challenge there in terms of exposing some of these concepts and terminology, because in order to get most out of these tools, to drive them really to their maximum value, we have to understand a little bit how they work under the bonnet. So there's a bit of a challenge there. But we've found is that each message, each statement into context helps. So again, let's take Microsoft 365 Copilot as an example. It is a scenario-driven tool. It is a use case-driven tool. It'll mean a different thing to every person that uses it, because you spend your day a certain way, I spend my day a certain way, and the way we spend our day, the way we go about our tasks, the way we execute on our responsibilities will also determine then the differences in how we use these tools and technologies. And that almost hyper-individualized focus that needs to be put in place when we do adoption of AI technologies really then starts paying dividends long term. So a little bit of that initial setting the scene, being really clear about what these tools are, what they are not, demystifying them, getting everyone to feel comfortable with them, putting every message in context from a training perspective, not approaching training in a sense that if we press this button, then this will happen. Everything, why would we even do something with the tool? What is the outcome? What is the value that comes out of it? So it's much more important to drive and build the mindset and the resilience and the muscle when it comes to these technologies. After that initial moment, it's a bit of a snowball effect that we have to build. So after that initial moment, it's all about that hyper individualization of the journey and just making sure that, if not most colleagues have that aha moment, that wow moment where they realize that this is potentially something great that can help them remove that friction out of their day.
Given that situation, from your lens, what is the difference between people who tried AI and people who actually changed how they work using AI? It's like, hey, this is awesome, and I'm going to incorporate this into my daily routine. I'll have a couple of workflows or different agents spin up. Or maybe some people, they just try the AI at the beginning, they get super excited, and that fades. So from your lens, how do you see that play out in the long run?
Yeah. So in adoption and change management, we have a few concepts that are very much fundamental and foundational to our discipline. And again, we've built those concepts and those learnings into something like our Rapid AI framework, where we go and execute on these concepts and ideas. One of the base concepts is that training doesn't equal adoption. So if we think about some cases and some scenarios where maybe we have worked in organizations, or we've been part of that experience where a change is happening, there's a new technology that's being introduced, and we receive a little bit of training for this new technology, and that is then considered to be the end of those efforts, and we are now to use that technology in a very effective, efficient way forever and ever. So I think we can all recognize potentially those types of situations if we've been in them. But what happens in reality is that in order to achieve adoption, which is that deep habitual usage of technology, there are multiple levers and multiple techniques that have to be put in place, and training is just one of them. So what we've seen as the main driver between implementations of AI technologies that might not be achieving all the outcomes that were set out to achieve versus the ones that are much more successful is the focus on people and the people-centric approach when it comes to adoption. So multiple levers like training and communications and communities of practice and sustainment techniques, ongoing support, change champions. It's incredibly important that we support our colleagues along the journey of getting to know the tools and the product, rather than it being a point-in-time exercise in shape of a handful of a training sessions, and then we expect our colleagues and people inside custom organizations then to pick it up on their own and to find the relevance to their roles. Going back to that principle of hyper-individualized approach, where you can start with quite foundational messages and training and pulling some of these foundational levers when it comes to adoption on larger cohorts of colleagues. But the real deep adoption and usage of tools then happens when we start translating that into smaller cohorts, value for smaller groups. We start working on actually understanding how do the scenarios that you usually undertake day to day, your responsibilities in your team, in the process you participate, how can they potentially be assisted and supported by some of these technologies and tools? It starts making the tools and the technologies relevant to these people. And going back to that personal aha moment or the personal wow moment where that connection is made and where the human brain works, right? So whenever we are presented with something that's new to us, almost subconsciously, we will put a bit of a wall. We will put a little bit of resistance, right? Because it's inbuilt into us. It's a normal human response to a change is, wait a minute, what is this? You know, so it's the techniques that we need to put in place that again, fully demystify the change, build awareness, build desire for our colleagues to do something, to participate in it. There's a whole sequence of events and techniques that we have to put in place rather than, for example, just, here's a training session and now we will go and we will expect you to use the technology. So it's about the way our brain perceives messages. It's about the way we as humans subscribe to participating in a journey, in a change. So all these techniques, when they're put in place, the end result is a much more powerful adoption than if these techniques are not being put in place.
So the human-centric led with AI is the future.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with that statement.
All right. So my follow-up question is, if you're speaking to a leader and if they can do one thing on Monday, what should it be?
I will probably answer in a bit of a philosophical way, but if a leader on Monday can think about something, I think they should think about where is it that they want to go with their business, with part of the business they're responsible and accountable for. Do they have a vision that people can subscribe to? Because if that vision exists, then part of that vision can be assessing the technologies that can support them and enable them along the way. It's very hard to start the journey of assessing any new technology, especially a technology that's still emerging like Gen AI and then large language models. So a technology that's emerging, a technology that presents a potential element of disruption to a lot of organizations and then processes and workflows. I think anchoring the thinking about that technology in a very strong why would we do this? What is the value to the business? What is the value to our people? I think that should be the first thought if you're starting this journey and if you're trying to build a position. It always starts with the business value rather than just the technology itself, because the technology is changing at such a rapid pace.
Yeah.
If we assess it today, it might not have the capability that we want it to have in order to meet a specific business problem. But if we assess it in 6 months' time, it might have that capability. So anchoring the approach and the vision and the thinking purely on technology itself is a very difficult thing to do, both from a perspective of how many variables have to come into play and decision points, but also from a perspective of the advancements that are being made in itself and how it's changing rapidly. So I think if we can have that anchoring point and a strong why in the business outcome, in the people of the organization and the value that this can bring, I think that's a good way to move forward.
So from your point of view, what's your big guess on how we will work with AI in the next couple of years?
I don't think making big guesses in this space is any statement that we can make right now is probably not going to age well. I think what we can say with some certainty is that these technologies are with us, they're going to stay with us for a while. I think that's something we can say with a high degree of certainty. I think also something we can say with a high degree of certainty is that one way or another we have to start thinking how they impact us, what is the value we can get out of them. If we are to learn from historical patterns and historical cycles, I think potentially one way the future can unfold is that the technology itself will get absorbed in different parts of businesses and What I mean by that is the part of the industry that focuses on personal productivity tools might almost to a certain degree become a commodity. We might be in 5 years' time talking about emails, Teams, and Copilot. Copilot is currently new, amazing. Lots of people are excited about it, and we talk about it a lot. But there is a potential where it becomes almost like a commodity in a few years, in the sense that it's just a tool that we use. It's just another tool, because if we think about emails and the way they've impacted how we communicate with one another, if we think about video calling technologies and how they've impacted the way we hold meetings, if we think about Copilot from the perspective of how do we find information, how do we generate drafts and start ideations and get critique on our work and so forth, there is a potential for that to be considered a commodity in the near future after we've gone through this initial wave of excitement. But then more complex solutions that are based on AI models running underneath a particular solution, being incorporated or being embedded in part of a general big IT solution, is going to be something that's going to become quite common, I would assume, if we think about how we consume apps and how we, even today, within the Microsoft stack, how we are starting to now work in Word and Excel and PowerPoint, with a Copilot being the assistant on the side. There is almost like a ever-growing presence now of AI assistants in a lot of apps that we use in daily life, both privately and professionally. So there's going to that infusion of those assistants, AI-powered assistants in almost every aspect of our lives, professionally and privately. And then we might have that category of large, bespoke, custom, potentially even autonomous solutions that assist the business. So without making any specific statements that might not age good, I think AI is just going to become more infused and more embedded and more seamless for us in a lot of touch points that we experience on a daily basis. I think that's somewhat of a safe way to look at where we're going in the future. But it's really hard to predict, because if we think about where we are now versus where we were maybe 12 to 18 months ago as an industry, there's been a few quantum leaps in ability and capability just over the last year and a half. And then to project where we can be in another couple of years, or 5 to 10 years, again, it's probably very hard. Going back to that original thought of, as the technology is advancing and evolving and changing, basing our entire approach on that means that we very rapidly will have to, as a business, change our positions, our visions, our strategies. So if we anchor that in the business outcomes and we use technology in a smart way to get value out of it as it evolves and becomes better and smarter, I think it's a more useful way to think about it.
I think I have one last question, but you pretty much covered the Rapid AI framework and also a couple of my questions. So one final question I just want to wrap this up with is for the one who's listening to this and also who's watching. So what is the first step they should take with AI? I mean, like, let's say if they're working with Copilot or Copilot Studio, and if they're very new to this, so what is the first step they should actually take?
Ask it how it can help you. Use Copilot, for example, if we are talking about Microsoft Copilot, use Microsoft Copilot to tell you how to better use Microsoft Copilot. That for me was my personal breakthrough, actually, with the personal productivity tools. So my own personal journey with these tools started about 3 years ago. And to be honest with you, I was struggling at the beginning, because trying to understand what it is, how do I use it, how do I drive it, how do I get value out of it. My personal aha moment was when I started using the tools to help me understand the tools and use them better. So what I mean by that is I had moments of analysis paralysis when I was trying to figure out what is the right prompt to do this very complex task. So let's say I have something that I want to achieve and it's really, really complex. And then you follow the right techniques and you know the prompting, the structure of a good prompt, but you're just kind of thinking, oh, how do I put this into context and how do I write these sentences? What I've personally discovered works best for me is I turn the dictation button on, microphone on in Copilot, and I just talk to it. And it's actually very, very good at understanding my incoherent thoughts and transferring that into something structured. So rather than me having to discover every single detail of how to write a good prompt, part of my personal learning journey was pressing the microphone button, dictating to the tool, explaining the task that I'm trying to achieve, the outcomes that I'm trying to achieve, and then just asking Copilot to help me create a prompt for that. So the most complex prompts I've ever done and the most complex tasks I've ever achieved inside Copilot were not based on prompts that I came up with, but they were based on prompts that Copilot comes up with. And it was just part of that learning journey for me, the fact that I can explain the task at hand, I can explain what I'm trying to get, and I can ask it to help me build a very good prompt for that. And then I use that prompt. Obviously, I'll always tweak it a little bit, but that was part of my learning journey. That was for me the aha moment. I think the first thing anyone can do with these tools is go and say, this is who I am, this is what I do, and this is what I find important and valuable. How can you help me achieve these outcomes quicker, better? That would be my advice for the first step.
Yeah, the more the context, the better the results.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that, we can wrap this up. Boris, thank you so much for joining, and this was very insightful. And I hope to see you in the next one. And thank you again.
Thank you, Sam. It was my pleasure.
All right.